Welcome to Talking Buffalo, featuring conversations with guests from around the world of sports, media, pop culture, and all things Buffalo, with your host, Patrick Moran.
For your eyes and for your ears only, episode 922, Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo sports talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Big thank you, as always, to everyone out there for watching and for listening, for following and for subscribing. I do appreciate y'all very, very much. Today's episode is sponsored by Imperial Pizza, 2 locations, the South Buffalo staple, 1035 Abbott Road, and their newer location at 1665 Main Street, not far from Canisius College. You should know by now, if you don't already, get out to Imperial Pizza, man. You talk about pizza and wings combo, chicken fingers, subs, Italian dinners, salads, all kinds of great food. One of the best known places in all Buffalo for food, and for good reason, because they are straight up one of the very best. As for today's show, I'm going to be talking just a minute now. I'm going to play an interview I just got done recording with Caleb James. Caleb James is a content creator for Arrowhead Pride, covers the Kansas City Chiefs. I did this a couple weeks ago before the Bills played Miami. I thought it would be fun and different to get a perspective from somebody who actually covers the Chiefs. You know, as a Bills content creator, and I'm sure many of you as Bills fans, you look at the box scores, you can look at some of the advanced metrics. You know some about Kansas City. You watch them play a little bit here and there when you get a chance. But when you get to hear from a perspective, especially somebody who's reasonable and objective, like Caleb certainly was, I think you kind of get an entire new understanding of this team. We talk about how big this game is from his perspective. Again, covering the Kansas City Chiefs. Is this a huge game like it is for Buffalo, or is this just, one of 17 for them? We talk about him being, as a content creator. I asked him, how frustrating is it when you see a lot of people, fans, media around the league kind of crapping on the Chiefs? They're 9-0, but they've been lucky a handful of games. They've gotten a lot of calls going their way from officials. So we get into that a little bit. And he pushes back a little bit, and he's not wrong about a lot of it too. Like even going back to last week when the Chiefs won a game because Denver missed or had a 35-yard field goal. 35-yard field goal should be a chip shot, right? Got blocked. That's how the Chiefs won the game. Well, he talks about the play and the design to block that kick, taking advantage of something that they saw on tape. Some really good stuff from him. We talk about Pat Mahomes and this offense, the injuries that they've overcome. DeAndre Hopkins, if he's moved the needle or not. Travis Kelce's kind of warming up. Xavier Worthy, of course. We talk about a excellent Kansas City defense, especially their run defense. That's top 3 in the NFL right now in EPA. We talk about Josh Allen. What else about the Buffalo Bills has him on alert? Some of the fun individual matchups, like Khalil Shakir going up against McDuffie, one of the very best slot corners in the NFL. And speaking of, Taron Johnson might be the best slot corner in the entire NFL. In fact, he just won AFC Defensive Player of the Week for this week. But anyway, how much is he going to be matched up on Travis Kelce? How are the Bills going to deploy them? And are the Bills the biggest obstacle right now to Kansas City finishing the season perfect at 17-0? So plenty of stuff coming up with Caleb. Then afterwards, I'm going to jump back on. I got some thoughts about the Buffalo Sabres. At least I'm saving it to the very end, though, this time, instead of doing it at the beginning. A little bit of UB football, and we'll talk about tomorrow's show as well. So anyway, that's what's coming up. In fact, I'm going to get into it right now. Here it is, my conversation with Caleb James from Arrowhead Pride. All right, I'm joined by Caleb James from Arrowhead Pride, part of the SB Nation, highly recommended from my guy Matt Warren from SB Nation, joining the show right now. How you doing, Caleb? Thanks for jumping on with me.
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me on today.
I think it would be fun, and this is what I wanted to do with today's episode, because tomorrow we're going to have a full Bills Chiefs preview, bowl predictions, all that stuff that we do before every game. I thought, especially with this game more than any other, this would be fun to be able to get the perspective of somebody who covers the Kansas City Chiefs, which before we get cooking real quick here, how long you been doing this now? And I'm a big fan, believe it or not. I know this is Bills Chiefs, but I've actually been quite fond of the Kansas City Chiefs going back to, do you remember a name, Damone Harris? He was on the practice squad, kind of went back and forth with the active roster. A close family friend of mine actually won his Super Bowl ring with the Kansas City Chiefs. So I've been following the Chiefs for a while. How long you been doing this with Arrowhead?
Well, I mean, I've grown up in the Kansas City area. I've lived here my entire life. And with Arrowhead Pride, I've been here since 2022. My first week with them was actually a regular season loss to the Bengals in the regular season in 2022. But overall, covering the Chiefs, I've been doing this since about 2018.
All right, that's awesome, man. I'm pumped to get your perspective from the enemy, so to speak, this week. Let me start by asking you this. Kansas City's obviously 9-0. How big of a game is this for the Kansas City Chiefs? Like, how do content creators, media, especially fans in Kansas City, view the what's become an annual now regular season tilt between the Bills and the Chiefs? How is it viewed there? How big is it from a Kansas City perspective? How much more is it than just another game on the schedule? Or is this just another game for the Chiefs on the schedule? You know, you got your AFC West rivals, of course, whether they're good or bad, the Broncos, the Chargers. How big of the game is this for you when you play the Bills each year?
I still think, I mean, it's a big game. I'm not, it's not like it's just another game, because the quality of football that these two teams have put on throughout the course of the last 5 seasons is about the highest quality of football, you can have. So just as being a fan of the sport in general, it's going to be a really good matchup that's going to come down to something late in the game, as it has, since these two teams have squared off since that COVID game in 2020. And kind of going through all the other games since then, you're seeing not only the highest caliber of quarterback play you could see between Mahomes, between Josh Allen, but you're seeing just like, stars all over the place, and this year is going to be even more interesting because the Bills look excellent. The Chiefs have flaws, but the Chiefs are the team that's undefeated right now. So that's kind of where a lot of that goes. And really, I think the biggest stakes in this game for both of these teams are the fact that if the Chiefs are able to get a 3-game lead on a team like Buffalo that's going to be in it for the 1 seed till the end, having, that kind of cushion before Thanksgiving is going to be big, deciding how this kind of thing is going to pan out.
Yeah. Every Bills Chiefs game, regular season or playoffs, with the exception of the 2020 title game, where the Bills actually led after the first quarter, but the Chiefs were definitely the better team. And then you clearly saw that over the last 3 quarters. Every game has been close and competitive between these two teams. And I have said, and I want to know if you agree with this, the difference between the Bills and the Chiefs in the playoffs, the last couple playoff games anyway, where the Chiefs have won very close games, is you could take Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, and it's not to say that one is even better than the other. I think both quarterbacks have played well enough in these games for their teams to win. The difference, and I think why the Chiefs have come out ahead, going back to, say, last year, for an example, the divisional round game in Buffalo, is that the complementary star players for the Chiefs have shown up in big moments where that hasn't been the case for the Buffalo Bills. Like, for an example, Travis Kelce, who was in a real lull for a big chunk of last season during the regular season, wakes up in the playoffs, is a monster game in Orchard Park in the playoffs. Chris Jones he doesn't get a sack, but he forces Josh Allen to throw a ball early on that last drive that probably is a touchdown if Chris Jones doesn't make that play. That's the Kansas City Chiefs complementary star players. Conversely, like for the Buffalo Bills, Stephon Diggs, who has 100, catches every season for 4 straight years, kind of disappears in that game. He drops a long pass late in the fourth quarter. A guy like Ed Oliver, who's highly regarded around the league, especially in Buffalo, a regular season dynamo, so to speak, goes out with a whisper against the Chiefs in the playoffs the last 2 years that they've played them. You kind of feel like that's been the biggest difference. Like those complementary or secondary stars, whatever you want to call it, for the Chiefs have just been better than the Bills in those big situations.
I would definitely agree with that. And then also at some point, I think the coaching does come back into play a little bit of a factor here and
Sure.
there. I think that would be fair to say also. I mean, and even if you think about the game last year, you didn't even bring it up, but the Chiefs' ground game was pretty effective. Isaiah Pacheco had a big game where the Chiefs did kind of find a way to get off the field on some of those, or they weren't allowing as many conversions on the ground in those situations. But yeah, I mean, like you said, you're going through, just these lists of players, with Allen and Mahomes being like they are, it is going to come down to, star B and star C and what they can do. And then, how is your O line going to hold up versus the defensive line and all that? That's really where these, contested games usually have come down to in the past.
As a Chiefs content creator this season, how frustrating is it for you at times, at least anyway, to see so many people around the league? And maybe I see it more in Buffalo because the Chiefs are a rival, a big rival, the team that the Bills just can't get over the hump in the playoffs anyway. How frustrating is it to see so many people kind of crap on the team's 9-0 start between, winning a lot of close games? Many would say that the Chiefs have gotten lucky a couple times. Your definition of luck might depend on a blocked 35-yard field goal to win a football game just last Sunday. So I'm sure you hear plenty of that. I'm sure you hear plenty of the referees, just always seeming to give the Chiefs the being the beneficiary of controversial calls, so on and so forth. Do you kind of get that sense? Not maybe so much in Kansas City, but when you look on Twitter or wherever you are, or other, teams on SB Nation, stuff like that, the opinion, the consensus of the Chiefs is that, yeah, they're 9-0, they're undefeated, but they've been lucky a lot this season and they've gotten a lot of calls from the referees. Well, like, what's your feeling when you hear something like that?
When I hear stuff like that, it makes me think back to growing up in Kansas City, the way I used to perceive Peyton Manning when he played for the Colts and the Broncos. Because if you know any, I'm 27 now. I grew up during a fun era of Chiefs football with like Priest Holmes and Jamal Charles. It just wasn't successful. And Peyton Manning won multiple playoff games against the Chiefs with the Indianapolis Colts. And then he comes to dominate the AFC West for 4 seasons. And the Chiefs only managed to beat him once. I can think of several times then where I wanted to like blame the refs and go, that was the terrible call. But then you look back on it and go, oh, the Chiefs, didn't force a punt an entire game versus the Colts. Our number one rushing attack had 50 yards. They held Jamal Charles to under 60 yards. Those are really the big things where a lot of that comes down to. And I guess I'm throwing this example out there. There's close calls in every football game of every level, from your local high school on Friday night down to, up to, the Super Bowl, into these big time, primetime NFL games. There's always these close calls because there is human element to the game. And just the way the, media is nowadays with all that stuff, the Chiefs are the top dogs. So they play the most on they have the most eyeballs on them. People are going to talk about the calls in their games a lot more than, if it's Carolina versus the Raiders and, the Raiders left tackle's been holding all day and no one calls it for the entirety of the game. So that's the way I kind of think about it. But it also does kind of stink because I will bring back up the Peyton Manning thing. For so long, I couldn't enjoy Peyton Manning because just of who he was playing for, Chiefs bitter rivals, to the point where, now that he is retired, it is easy to appreciate how great of a player he was. And to some extent, I feel like there's a lot of people that are going to be doing that with like Mahomes and Kelce and some of this stuff, just because they're going to be so focused on wanting, other teams to succeed. And they're just so frustrated with the fact that the Chiefs are sustaining success. And if, they find some minute little detail, like a left guard can't stay on his feet on the field goal and they send our heaviest hitters at him at the very last second of the game, is that luck or is that, a little bit extra that makes, a great team a great team?
You talk about Peyton Manning, and as you're saying it, I'm thinking in my mind, I'm like, what, as a Bills person, it's Tom Brady. Growing up, not for me growing up because I'm old, man, but just these last, this regime, this era, this past era of Bills football, it was really hard. You hate Tom Brady. You couldn't beat him. But now that he's retired, it's like you really start to sit back and appreciate how good he really was and what the Patriots were able to do through all those years. I'll tell you, Caleb, let me know if you agree with this philosophy. To me, what separates good from great teams, and this is why I give the Chiefs so much credit this season and just for the last handful of seasons, is you're going to have some great games. You're going to have some bad games. To me, the great teams, you end up you win the games you're supposed to win. You don't blow games like we've seen the Ravens this season. They look like world beaters at times. Then they lose to the Browns at home. They lose to the Raiders at home. Great teams really rarely, if ever, do that. And then great teams could play bad. And I saw this during the Bills Super Bowl era when he went to 4 straight Super Bowls. Lots of, Jim Kelly's first ballot Hall of Famer. He played terrible in a lot of games until you needed that one drive, that one play, that one third down conversion, and he'd come through for you. And I mean, that's what Patrick Mahomes does, where you can play bad for a lot of the game, but when you absolutely have to have it, that's when your quarterback or your defense, whatever it is, they step up and they find a way to win. And that's kind of what separates the Chiefs from a lot of just the good teams in the league. That sounds pretty reasonable, right?
I mean, yeah, that's totally reasonable. I would agree with that. This week, like I said on my podcast, the AP breakdown that I did last night, the Chiefs definitely deserve to lose to the Broncos. Sean Payton said the Broncos outplayed the Chiefs. He wasn't wrong. There was nothing he said with that was wrong. As good as the Chiefs defense has been this year, the Broncos still went on a long drive at the end of the game to set it up. But just in that one little instance, they get, two of their leaders on defense, Karlaftis and Chenal, they execute a plan to go after a guy and block a field goal, and they manage to pull it off. So, and the Chiefs have had other games like that this season also. I mean, there's been a lot of close stuff. Even a week before this, you go to overtime versus Tampa Bay. Okay, Mahomes comes out the last drive of the game, and they're pretty much perfect down the field. I don't even think they didn't even get to a third down until they were at the 1 yard line. So, I mean, it is, just executing at the right time.
Is this where I tell you as a Bills content creator that I'm screaming at the TV for Tampa, like, why are you kicking the extra point? You go for 2, man. You got to do that there. Talk about this season, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense. Like, how has it looked in totality so far through your lens through 9 weeks? Mahomes and this Chiefs offense. He's thrown a lot of interceptions. So if you're looking at it from the outside, like I am to an extent anyway, it doesn't look that impressive, but obviously, again, you don't get to be 9-0 without having an offense that it's at least efficient. I know you guys are great on staying on the field, third down conversions. Talk about the Chiefs offense this season.
I think the best way to describe it is incomplete. And if you look at like their whole big picture of what their plan was coming into the season, they sign Hollywood Brown, wanting him to come in and be like their number 2 receiver, with Rashee Rice obviously being number 1. They go in there and draft Xavier Worthy with the expectation being, Worthy's not going to have to come in and be like under pressure to produce right away, but we're going to be able to use him in a lot of different looks and a lot of downfield looks to stretch out, defenses and kind of reopen up back these deep balls again. Obviously, the running game with Kelce, or not with Kelce, the running game with Pacheco, and then obviously the emergence of some of these other backs on the roster. That was kind of where they were leaning, especially with some of the and then just the tight end room. But then you go into the preseason, and Hollywood Brown suffers a season-ending injury in the preseason. Rashee Rice is out for the season a couple weeks in. Isaiah Pacheco breaks his leg, and he's just now starting to get back to healthy. So all of a sudden, you've kind of got, what you've always had in Travis Kelce, but now in some regards, you've got a younger and more inexperienced receiver room than before. And, they've made, and they did struggle, those first few games of the season. Mahomes was able to find Worthy on a couple of deep balls, like against the Chargers, for example, that did kind of, keep them in games, give them that momentum. They bring back Juju Smith-Schuster, who instantly gets hurt. And now they go out and get Hopkins. And he's, I've been very optimistic about him. He's looked good, and when he's been in this week against the Broncos, this past week did feel kind of like a little step back. just a little bit because I was, thinking people were getting excited after that big Monday night performance where he did have 2 touchdowns. Really, for me, the biggest thing this season for the Chiefs' offensive success has been the fact that the offensive line has, run blocked pretty well, and that they have, found Kareem Hunt's, his legs are still somewhat fresh enough or young enough just a little bit to be able to move the ball on the ground. They've had success running the football on teams this year, but it's been incomplete. I definitely see where they're going to be at when they want to end the season. I do like seeing that Kelce has started to heat up a little bit, though, and they're starting to kind of get him rolling a little bit.
Yeah, I'm being a box score scout right now only. Again, I haven't followed the Chiefs week to week intimately, but you look in the last 3 weeks, Kelsey's got like 32 catches for 254 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he's definitely heating up. Acquiring DeAndre Hopkins, there are a lot of people that are like, he's washed. I'm like, no, he ain't. He's not washed. He was washed because he was with the Tennessee Titans and, horrific quarterback play. Last game aside, you've seen him kind of move the needle for the offense a little bit. Am I right on saying that? Like DeAndre Hopkins, even at his age and stuff with this offense's fit, does he still feel like a needle mover to you?
I definitely think he is, and that's just because if people haven't realized the last 2 years, the Chiefs have had receivers playing significant reps for them that, quite frankly, nobody else wants. Last season, MVS, he is what he is, but, he got cut earlier this season because he's not very good, and,
Bills fans know that.
Yeah. Maybe the fantasy football crowd is going to pick him up now that he's on the Saints, and they don't really have many other people.
Right.
But, Justin Watson, well, he's a four-phase special teams guy also who's, moonlights as our wide receiver 2 or 3. And then you've got Noah Gray. So I think just having like a quality professional receiver in there moves the needle. But having a guy like him who can still go up and get stuff, who can still run good routes and create separation, I think all of that stuff moves the needle. And I think you're starting to see that because Kelce's starting to get opened back up a little bit more because people are worried about Hopkins again.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It kind of sucks from a Buffalo perspective. I don't think it's as big of a deal in Kansas City, but the Bills badly needed a wide receiver going into this draft. And of course, they're on the clock at 28, and they trade down with the Kansas City Chiefs, which made a lot of Bills fans lose their mind. You're handing the Chiefs, which turned out to be Xavier Worthy. Well, Keon Coleman has been very good as a rookie for the Bills this season. However, he's injured and he's already been ruled out for this game. So it kind of sucks to not be able to see the Worthy versus Coleman matchup. All right, so we know what the Chiefs are offensively, but the thing about the Chiefs this year, just like last year, is minus maybe Chris Jones, there's so much quote unquote star power, but this team continues to be keyed by this defense. This is an excellent defense. They're third in rush defense EPA. Very good defense. Like, what is key in this Kansas City Chiefs defense?
Well, you mentioned Chris Jones, and a lot of it does have to do with him. I mean, he doesn't have, his production this year has been down. He's seeing a lot more double teams. That's starting to open up stuff a little bit more for some of these other pass rushers like Tershawn Wharton. It's opening stuff up for these other guys, and we haven't even gotten back Charles Omenihu yet. But I think it's just the overall mentality that they do play with. They play great team defense. It's not just a bunch of guys out there doing different things. They all, on every play have a common goal. One of the reasons they've been so good at stopping the run is they do have good linebackers. Leo Chenal, who blocked that kick, is having a fantastic season as our strong linebacker. Nick Bolton is the middle linebacker. He struggles sometimes, in pass coverage, but he is an outstanding run defender also. And Drew Tranquil, he's kind of the jack of all trades guy. He does a little bit of everything. He's had a good year. We have they have a secondary that's willing to tackle between Justin Reed coming down and playing in the box, Trent McDuffie, Brian Cook, a little bit banged up on the cornerback, the cornerback room right now. That is a little bit of area for concern, but just overall, they do have the one big star defensive lineman in Jones. They have good linebackers, and they just do little things well. They cover well, they tackle well. They don't give up big plays. They'd rather get flagged for 15 yards than give up a 50-yard bomb, which I do think is definitely a smart play, especially against, some of the better teams in the NFL, and they do just every once in a while find a way to just get a turnover that you don't think they should get. And that kind of goes back into what you were talking about with Mahomes a second ago. It's when they do need a stop. You know what Spags is going to do. He's calling everyone after the quarterback. They're coming some way, somehow. So I do think they do a good job of recognizing the situations they're in and when they do have to just send everyone.
I think, and it's a little bit early in the week to know this, Amari Cooper in a walkthrough on Wednesday is limited at practice. Didn't play last week. The Bills are on a bye next week. You wonder if they're going to play it safe with him again. Keon Coleman already out. Dalton Kincaid not practicing today being Wednesday. Hurt his knee last week. We'll see how that goes. But one thing from a Bills perspective that really scares me, because this is to your point, Spags is going to bring heat, especially on obvious passing downs. And the Bills without Coleman, without Kincaid, possibly without Cooper, those are blitz beaters. Those are their guys who are going to be able to get open quick and make plays. So you worry a little bit about Josh Allen, getting blitzed and being able to find guys quick, hot reads, stuff like that when you got some receivers out. Besides Josh Allen, again, sticking with this whole from a Kansas City perspective theme here, besides Josh Allen, like what else about the Bills has you on alert? This is a defense. Teron Johnson was just named AFC Defensive Player of the Week just an hour or so ago. So, I mean, they got some talent on defense. They got a pretty good running game. James Cook has played well this year. Like, what about the Bills outside of Josh Allen has your alert going a little bit, your radar up?
Well, definitely with James Cook and the way he's been able to run the football this year. And I think that's going to be a good matchup overall. It's going to probably go a long way in figuring out this one, because the Chiefs have played some pretty good rushing attacks this year, and they've kept some good backs in check. The only thing with that is, though, these other teams they've played and have done that have not had the greatest quarterback play in the world. This is where they're going to have to kind of balance it out with, how good Josh Allen is and, how they can stop the run, because a lot of that stuff does come down to box numbers and box angles. How many people are you going to be willing to put, so to speak, in the box to be able to kind of load up and stop the run versus how many people, you're going to have on alert in the secondary for what's going on. That and the Chiefs pass protection has been pretty lackluster. Not so much along the interior. It's been more with the tackle position. Jawan Taylor just had a pretty poor game against the Broncos, and our Wanya Morris, the regular starting left tackle, is out. So they had a rookie, Kingsley Suamatia, in the game, and he struggled greatly versus a really good Denver pass rush. But obviously, with Rousseau and those guys in there, that is going to be obviously big key, because as been proven multiple times, the best way to beat Mahomes is to be able to put pressure on him in the pocket. That's typically the most standard for teams having defensive success versus the Chiefs.
Yeah, and the Bills have had some in the regular season, not so much in the playoffs the last couple of years. You mentioned Jawan Taylor. One of the funny side notes here in Buffalo is there's a thing going around like, how quick are the fans in Orchard Park going to lose their mind when he gets away with what should be a false start, or that he's lined up halfway in the backfield? That's kind of like the running joke with Taylor. I'll tell you, a matchup besides the obvious, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, that is the matchup, and it's always going to be, because these are the two best quarterbacks in football. The slot guys. Khalil Shakir is a really good, effective slot receiver. McDuffie is as good as it gets in the slot as a corner. Conversely, you got Kelce. I don't know how much the Bills I would expect, especially after what Kelce did to the Bills in the playoffs last year. I think you're going to see a lot of Teron Johnson on Kelce. Those are fun matchups featuring, again, some of, the better players in the league. That's something that you're looking forward to seeing, like the middle of the field, the inside, how these guys do these slot corners against two really good pass catchers.
No, definitely. And McDuffie is due for a bounce back game. He played pretty poor. The Broncos got him in bad spots. Like I'd mentioned, the Chiefs cornerbacks have been a little bit of a weakness this year. Not so much McDuffie, but a guy like Cortland Sutton's not the greatest matchup in the world for him, because Sutton is, the bigger, longer, more physical guy. That's kind of where they were able to take advantage of him at. So I think he's going to be looking back for that bigger matchup. But then, with the Chiefs offense, obviously they're going to have Kelce there in the slot kind of doing his thing against Johnson. that's going to be a good matchup. That's going to go a long way. But I'm more curious to see how the Chiefs are going to kind of use Xavier Worthy out of that. If they use him in ways against the Bills in the past, Chiefs had used like McCole Hardman and Tyreek Hill, some of those ways where they had big plays versus the Bills and big moments. I'm curious to see if they move Worthy into some of those spots.
Yeah, definitely. Does Buffalo feel like, as we wrap up here with Caleb James, does Buffalo feel at this point to you like the biggest obstacle to finishing a season 17-0, besides the faithful here in Orchard Park and, Bills Mafia that's scattered all over the country, the world for that matter? I would venture to say the 1972 Miami Dolphins, players that are still alive or fans of that team, probably are rooting for Buffalo just as hard. It feels like this is probably the best chance for a team to stop the Kansas City Chiefs from going undefeated. So that's part one. Are they the biggest obstacle? And secondly, how much does going 17-0 matter to you, if at all?
The Chiefs, this is one of the games I would say is one of the Chiefs' 3 biggest games remaining on their roster, which obviously they're going to have an important game versus the Chargers, but those kind of divisional games always get close. It'd be this game versus the Bills, the Steelers on Christmas Day, and actually they play the Texans right before Christmas Day, and kind of a weird gauntlet kind of schedule. But when you do look back on it, the Bills are the best out of those teams. So this is kind of the biggest obstacle between doing that. To me personally, I'm not so much worried about the 17-0 just because it is a long season and it has been darn near a calendar year since the Chiefs have lost. And, the last loss they had was on Christmas Day against the Raiders last year, to where this is kind of going down on towards the path as one of the great, winning streaks in NFL history for the regular season. So I'd say, to me personally, it doesn't matter as much. Now, I don't know what's going on in the Chiefs' minds. They might want to prove that they are the best team ever, a team that's trying to go undefeated and be a three-peat. You'd be pretty hard-pressed to argue against them being the most dominant team of all time. So there could possibly some of that feeling inside the locker room. And I'd say just with, how the NFL is and the fact that you're probably going to see some combination of Baltimore, Buffalo, Houston, the Steelers again in the playoffs, just be smart. You don't have to empty the entire playbook this week because it still is November. And I do think that Andy Reid is smart enough to recognize that.
It's funny you say that. We're talking about this on the show just yesterday. Look, this is a big game for the Bills. There's no sugarcoating it because the Chiefs are, and rightfully so, the measuring stick. They're the measuring stick right now at 9-0. They're the measuring stick over the last 5, 6, 7 years. But I will say it doesn't feel like life or death for the Bills to me and to a lot of people who cover the team right now, because the Bills have shown over the last couple seasons, that they could beat the Chiefs. They've done it in the regular season the last couple years. But they got, even if you win this game, if the Bills win this game 35-10, I don't think it makes you any more confident or less confident that you're going to beat them in the playoffs. You got to beat Kansas City when it counts. So until you do, this game kind of feels just slightly a little bit less. It's funny you say that with the playbook too. We were talking about that yesterday. Like, if the Bills got anything up their sleeves, I don't want to see it today. Or Sunday, I should say. I also want to see something better than a DeMar Hamlin fake punt attempt in a playoff game like they did last year in Orchard Park. I still can't believe that. Last thing here, then I got to let you go, man. Not really a question about this game, just generally speaking, a little bit of jealousness and envy coming out of me right now, finishing up here with Caleb James. I'm twice your age. I've been a Bills fan most of my life. I've been in media in, different various ways for kind of a long time now. I've had this podcast for 6.5 years, been covering the Bills throughout this whole Josh Allen run. Bills have never got into a Super Bowl, let alone winning one. As a content creator and a lifelong fan, what did it mean to you? You've done it 3 times now, but even just go back to last year to be able to cover a team that's actually won it all. That's not something I can relate to. Like, what does that feel like covering a team that is literally, the defending Super Bowl champions right now?
It's all unbelievable, especially, growing up fairly close to the stadium like I did, going to games all the time. It's just kind of one of those weird things that you never really saw. I never envisioned this 10 years ago, but here we are.
Yeah.
And so just try not to try not to be one of those, fans or analysts that lives or dies by every snap. Just try to take a step back and really enjoy it all every once in a while, because these are going to be like some of the most memorable games the Chiefs playing in the history of the NFL. And like, this is like record setting stuff, history book kind of stuff. So just been trying to enjoy it the best I can, live in the moment.
Yeah, I tell you what, too. I kind of get a sense, too. Maybe that's why I'm not quite as up for this game right now. I got a feeling that this is going to be the first of two meetings between the Bills and the Chiefs before this season is all over. Anyway, guys, if you are a Bills fan, obviously most of you watching this are a Bills fan, but be sure you give Caleb a follow on Twitter at CJ Scoobs. Check out Arrowhead Pride. I love SB Nation stuff. And especially like the week when the Bills are playing an opponent, I really like to spend some time there reading up on the team from the other team's perspective. And what's the podcast you got? I'm going to have to go check it out before Sunday.
It is the AP Breakdown. We go live about once a week on Twitter and on YouTube. It's myself, and the host of the show is Ron Kopp Jr. He's our lead analyst over at AP. We usually just get on. It's a film breakdown show, so we just go through X's and O's and talk about things. Last night was interesting just because of how crazy the Denver game was, but we'll definitely be live next week breaking down whatever happens in this game coming up, Chiefs Bills.
And I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, Caleb. Appreciate you, man.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, one more time, big thank you to Caleb James from Arrowhead Pride. Loved having some Kansas City perspective on the show. We did this a couple weeks ago. I had Merrick Brave from Finsider before the Bills played Miami. It's nice to be able to talk to someone who covers the other side and kind of get the sense what they're feeling and what they're thinking going into this game, and learn about that team a little bit more intimately, as opposed to just looking at EPA charts and box scores and stats and things like that. Fun chat. Really appreciate his time. By the way, that came together real quick. I literally reached out to him earlier today and hit him up to come on the show. He was gracious enough to give me a half hour of his time. So I do appreciate that very much. And I learned a lot about that team and what he's thinking and what the Kansas City Chiefs and maybe their fan base is thinking. And I'll tell you, my biggest takeaway from that conversation, and I don't know if you agree with me, let me know if you do or not, but my sense is this game means a lot more to the Buffalo Bills, and maybe especially the Bills Mafia, than it does to the Chiefs. That's not to say this is not a big game, a very big game for the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, this is a team right now that is undefeated, and if you get past the Bills, 17-0 is 100% in play. So to sit here and say that it's not a big game for the Chiefs, it's just 1 of 17 would be ridiculous. It's a big game for the Chiefs, but I think for most Bills fans, probably the team, maybe the media, content creators as well, this is a little bit bigger on the Buffalo side. And if you look at it from the Kansas City perspective as well, they still got 2 games left against the Chargers in their own division. And while they are 9-0, and the Chargers, I believe, have 3 losses on the season, hell, the Chargers always play them tight. And if they could sweep the Chiefs, they're right in that race. So I would get that. Unlike the Bills, who have no competition right now, let's just be honest. There's no competition for the Bills in the AFC East at all. I've said it a million times. Here comes 1,000,001. You could go and print AFC East championship T-shirts for the Bills right now, because that division is over. Even though the Chiefs are 9-0, they still play the Chargers twice, maybe not so much. Plus, those rivalries are just huge with them, with the Chargers, the Raiders, the Broncos, that division. They're a bunch of teams that just really hate each other. I mean, we know about it here in Buffalo, but they might be on another level with Kansas City. Plus, they've been here before. They've done this before. So I think it's a little bit of a bigger game for the Bills and for Bills Mafia. I got to be honest with you, not for me. I care. I'm not going to sit here and say I don't care. Like, if the Bills win on the post-game show Sunday night, I'm going to be really high. And if the Bills lose, I'm going to be sitting here on the post-game show Sunday night, and I'm probably going to be pretty demoralized and dejected. But that said, long-term, in the days to follow, I'm simply not as all in for this game as I've been in other recent Bills-Chiefs games because I've learned, and hopefully you have too, it's not about what the Bills do against Kansas City in October and November. It's about what they do in January. The Bills have beaten the Chiefs now the last couple times they played them during the regular season, but they have fallen short in the playoffs. To me, I'm not going to feel a whole lot better about this team's Super Bowl prospects if they win this game, and I'm not going to feel too dejected and say that the Super Bowl window for this season just got slammed shut because they lost to the Chiefs. Even if they lose 35-10, I'm not going to feel that way. Lots of factors. One of them is injuries. No Keon Coleman on Sunday. He's already been ruled out. Matt Milano's practicing, but we know he's not playing on Sunday. Dwan Smoot's not playing. Dwayne Carter's not playing. Those are two valuable backup interior or one an edge, a little bit of both, a hybrid, and an interior guy that hopefully in January are going to matter because we all know by now you're not beating Patrick Mahomes if your front four is not getting to him and putting pressure on him at least. Anyway, you don't have them. Maybe no Dalton Kincaid this week. Maybe no Spencer Brown this week. Neither of those guys are practicing on Wednesday, even during a walkthrough. Maybe no Amari Cooper. He is limited at Wednesday's walkthrough. Wrist issue, didn't play last week. Bills are on a bye next week. Those guys, when you play this team again in January, if you get there, because let's be real here. There's a very good chance that the road to the Super Bowl for the Bills, or for any other team in the AFC for that matter, it's going to go through Kansas City. And it's very likely going to go through Kansas City at Arrowhead Stadium. So you play this team again probably in January. Maybe all those guys are back. You got Coleman back, got Smoot back, got Kincaid, Cooper, Brown, all great players too, right? Now, on the other hand, there's some guys who are going to be out there on Sunday who, knowing the recent history of the Bills with these big injuries, there's some guys that are playing Sunday that won't be there in the playoffs, and you'll have to be able to overcome that. So I'm not going to put too much. I care about this game. I'm just not going to allow myself to put too much stock into this football game. I'm playing it a little bit safer if I'm Sean McDermott with these injuries. As bad as I would like to beat the Chiefs, I'm not going to do it at the expense of potentially Amari Cooper's wrist getting worse and then him being out long-term instead of maybe just this week and back after the bye. In fact, I can say the same thing with literally any player on this team who's injured right now. If you're 100%, if you're 95%, yeah, I want you out there. I want to win this game. But if you're 70%, you're 75%, and the risk is there to get injured again or worse, I'm not playing you. Now, if it's January, all hands on deck, you're all in, you got to win the game or you go home, yeah, then you push it. Then you play them. But right now, November, I don't care if it's the Chiefs. I don't care if it's the Carolina Panthers. You're not risking longer-term injury for a game in November, especially when you're 8-2 and your division is pretty much wrapped up. Same thing with the playbook, by the way. Like, if there's a couple tricks up Joe Brady's sleeve, hopefully something better than that stupid flea flicker we saw in Baltimore. But if you got something better than that up your sleeve, keep it up your sleeve. I don't need to see it on Sunday. I don't need to see the Bills empty the playbook, the tricky playbook, to beat the Chiefs in November. Get to January. Good chance you're going to see this team again. You're going to the playoffs. You're going to go through Kansas City. You're going to have to at some point, unless someone else knocks them off before you can get to them. Regardless, you get my point here. I'm not saying I'm going to be vanilla like September, a preseason game, but any tricks you've been holding on to this point, hold on to them a little bit longer. Big game, though. Thursday's not a big game. It is a big game. It's not going to be, all or nothing with me. I won't allow it this time. It's all about the Bills' secondary star players playing better. We talked about this during our segment with Caleb. The difference between the Chiefs and the Bills is during the regular season, they've just played well as a team and they've won. The playoffs, guys like Chris Jones and Travis Kelce stepped up Guys like Stephon Diggs and Ed Oliver did not. So if the Bills are going to be successful in January, Matt Milano, Teron Johnson, Ed Oliver again, these guys, Amari Cooper, these guys who are James Cook, who are your star players now beyond the quarterbacks, are going to have to step up. Ultimately, that's what it's all about. Before we get out of here real quick, at least I'm doing better now. I'm talking Sabres, but instead of cramming it in your face at the beginning of the show, I've waited patiently here until the end. Sabres did practice on Wednesday. Good news, Tage Thompson and UPL are both day-to-day per Lindy Ruff. Both could actually return to the lineup as early as Thursday against the St. Louis Blues. Thursday being tonight, if you're watching this sometime during the day. Not so much good news on Matthias Samuelsson. He is week to week. I mean, what the hell? What else is new with him? I'm sorry, but this dude is just always getting hurt. At some point, it's a trait. It's a trend. It's a pattern. It's not just a series of freak accidents. Good thing that they only got 5 years left on his contract after this season. What a brutal 7-year, $30 million contract, whatever the hell it was, how that is looking since he signed it, man. Just awful. And I'm so angry about that game on Monday. That Montreal game, I'm still pissed off, and I'm recording this literally 48 hours later. I know the NHL is different than the NFL. There's 82 games. I hear it all the time. Oh, it's in November. 82 games. Well, guess what, man? 82 games are not. These are the games. Monday's the kind of game you always come back to. Always come back to. It gets to be March, late in the season, and the Sabres are 6 to 8 points short. And you're like, man, how could I go find 2 or 3 games where the Sabres had no business losing this game, but they did against a shitty-ass hockey team. And that's what Montreal is, a shitty-ass hockey team. And you go and you look. There's your game. You lose, you score 5 goals at home, and you don't even get a point. Not even a regulation point against the Montreal Canadiens. It's pathetic. It's inexcusable. They know it. Lindy Ruff knows it. You know it as well. Those are the games that come back and they bite you in the ass. And I'm not waiting to March because I've seen this rodeo many, many times. 13 years, possibly a 14th year in a row. You lose these games, you go through a really shit stretch, just like the Sabres did to start this season, and you get in a hole where you don't get out of. You might climb out for a little bit. You might go from the bottom of the barrel and you get to the middle of the pack where you're congested with a bunch of other teams, and then you just fall right back. And it's because of these stupid-ass losses. To me, the pressure on this hockey team needs to be right now, here, mid-November. Pressure now, not in March. Because this team will, if they play like they did against Montreal a handful more times, they'll be donezo before March. And I think the pressure needs to be cranked up high right now on Kevin Adams. I know it's easier said than done. I know hockey is different than other sports. I know a lot of, if not most of, the good players have some form of no trade clause written into their contracts. And I also know that we're talking about the Buffalo Sabres here, not the Colorado Avalanche or the Vegas Knights. So almost any player that has any form of a no trade, even if it's limited to 3 to 5 teams, they probably have the Sabres on their no trade list. I get that. But somehow, some way, you got to find a way. You got to find a way to do something with that second line. Zucker moving up, I like that concept because he's good enough to play in that line. But the problem is Zucker on the third line with McLeod and Greenway makes that third line really, really good. They got to find a guy, and it's somebody who's not in this organization right now that is good enough to be a good second line player. Your first line is set. That line has been fantastic. Tuck, Tage, Peterka, it's been great. Again, the third line's been really good. The fourth line has come alive. They're playing really, really good hockey right now. That second line sucks. It sucks. And there's nobody on this roster, and there's nobody in Rochester right now, including Kulik, who's going to come up and make that second line consistently good. They got to go get another guy, whether that guy is a center, and then you could bump Dylan Cousins to the wing. Dylan Cousins is just straight up too much of an investment. You cannot give up on him. You're signed him for too long, for way too much money. What are you going to do? Again, the third line's been good. The fourth line's been good. The first line's been good. You start moving Cousins down the line, you're screwing up the other lines. You got to find a way and find somebody who's a perfect fit for Dylan Cousins. Maybe it's a center and Dylan Cousins plays on the wing. Zach Benson has played really well since he came. Now he's healthy again, and we know now why he didn't look so good early in the year. He was hurt. He's played really well as rate. So I'm good with Benson. You're stuck with Cousins, but Jack Quinn, you got to do something. So whether you get a center, you move Cousins to the wing, or whether you keep Cousins a center and you go get yourself a winger, you got to do something because Jack Quinn right now is a disaster. He's a mess. He's not it. This dude is falling all over the place. I mean, like quite literally on Monday, falling all over the place. Crazy regression right now from Jack Quinn. I don't know what the answer is. Does he sit in the press box for a long stretch of games? I don't know. Do you try to get him in a trade package if you're going to go try to get a top 6 guy? Include him in a trade package. Maybe he needs a change of scenery or something. I mean, the guy showed a lot of skill as recently as 2 years ago. I don't know what's up with him, but he is hindering badly. Not just him, but he is largely responsible for hindering the Sabres second line. Just brutal. Anyway, big game Thursday tonight. St. Louis Blues, followed by they're in Philly on Saturday, and then they go out west for 3 in a row. Pretty good opportunity to make a little bit of noise and, like I said, get on a little bit of a streak. This team did win 3 in a row before the Montreal stinker on Monday. They also lost 3 in a row before that. This team needs to find some consistency. And again, Kevin Adams has to figure out something, somehow, some way, add a top 6 talent to this team. You sure as shit got the money to do it. We all know that. One last thing, too. Props to UB. Props to UB football, man. You know, I have Sean Dolak, their star linebacker, on the show last Friday. Talked about, being one more win away from being bowl eligible, still in the hunt for a MAC championship. And guess what, folks? They are now bowl eligible because they won a overtime thriller on Tuesday night at home. They beat Ball State 51-48. And just an incredible game. Sean brought the noise, dude. 17 tackles, tackle for a loss, had an interception, a 42-yard return on that interception. He was a beast. His battery mate at linebacker that he talked about on the show last week was awesome too. Red Murdoch, he had 19 tackles, 1.5 for a loss. Just a wild, crazy game. Good for UB because, I'm not going to sit here and try to act like I follow that team closely, but I do know they were picked to have a shitty season. And now they're here at 6-4 and they're eligible to go to a bowl game. And who knows, man, with 2 games left, they still got a chance to win the MAC. It's pretty crazy. All right, so that's going to do it for today. Tomorrow, a full Bills Chiefs preview episode, the ones I like to do every week. On Friday, we'll talk about both teams. Again, I kind of got some newfound perspective about the Chiefs after talking to Caleb today. So we'll talk about the Chiefs. We'll talk about the Bills. We'll talk about 3 keys to victory for the Bills. I'll do 3 bold predictions for the game like I've been doing every week. Likely going to have a guest, still working on that. Also, might have this show taped live somewhere on location. So hopefully I can put that all together. But regardless, definitely on Friday, we will have our big Bills Chiefs preview. So that's going to do it for the show. I want to, ask you one more time. If you're not doing so already, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you're watching this on YouTube, really helps us grow. And then especially on the audio side, like even if you are watching this on YouTube and you typically watch the episodes, just take 10 seconds, go type in Talking Buffalo on either Spotify or Apple and just hit that follow button. It's so important to helping us grow on the audio side as well. Plus, you're going to get some exclusive stuff on the audio side, like bonus episodes that you're not going to see here on the YouTube side. So thank you again very much. I do appreciate you. Bills, Chiefs, A big preview coming up on the show tomorrow.